If you're a fan of an NBA team that is not the Boston Celtics, I have some bad news for you. The Celtics that won the title this year are not going anywhere anytime soon. Now, I feel like we say that every single season, right? Every single time that there's a team, especially a new team or a semi-new team to championship contention that wins the title, we all start looking at the future and saying, who's going to stop this team now? We did it last year with Denver, and they didn't even make the conference finals. But this Celtics situation is just different than all those other ones. Because even though it doesn't really feel like it, when you look at the numbers, this Celtics team has been on a pretty historic run. Now, granted, the path to the finals was easy for Boston. That's just the way that it is. You can say it 100 different ways. You can talk about injuries. You can talk about the strength of the teams, even if they were healthy. It doesn't matter. Boston had a very easy time getting to the finals, and the Eastern Conference in general, certainly after the injuries, just wasn't very good. But then they get to the finals and they absolutely dominate a Mavs team that looked really good. They looked like a championship caliber team as they went through the stronger conference in the West. And the Celtics had absolutely no issues with them. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying that this is one of the best teams of all time. This team certainly still has plenty of flaws, injuries being one of them, which we saw with Kristaps Porzingis, individual offensive creation being one of them, as we saw with Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum. But even though they're not one of the best teams of all time, relative to their competition, specifically in the Eastern Conference, it looks like they're going to be around for a long, long time. And that's especially true when you look at all the different ages throughout the roster. Like, yes, you got Big Al who's 38. You've got Drew Holiday who's 34. Everybody else is under 30 years old within their core rotation. Derek White is 29. Kristaps Porzingis is 28. Jaylen Brown is 27. Jayson Tatum is still just 21 years old. Okay, not actually. He's 26 or something like that. But the point is, from a youth standpoint, Boston's not going anywhere anytime soon. These guys, as long as they're on the roster, are going to continue to be good. And the best thing about them this season was that they had a five-man unit that nobody else could touch. Holiday, White, Brown, Tatum, KP. It was the best five-man unit in the entire league. It wasn't particularly close. When those five guys were healthy and they were making threes, nobody could beat them. And the only piece of that would start to fall off soon would be Drew Holiday, who's the guy that they rely on the least for all the stuff you would expect to fall off earliest, which is offense. Drew Holiday doesn't even provide them that much offense, and he's the only piece of this that could fall off anytime soon. And from a contractual standpoint, everybody else is coming back next season. Everybody that matters is still going to be a Boston Celtic next year. Al, Derek White, both of those guys are under contract next year. They're 2025 free agents, although I presume that Derek White is going to get an extension similar to what Drew Holiday got in the middle of the year. Holiday just got that extension. KP got an extension when he signed with when they traded for him this past offseason. Jaylen's on a big new deal. Tatum's going to get a big new deal. Everybody that they have is going to be back and is going to be around for years. And probably the most terrifying piece of all of this, if you're a fan of one of these other teams, specifically in the Eastern Conference, is it's not like this was a breakthrough moment for the Celtics. Everything that they had done this year, that they did this year, they had already done previously, with the exception of actually winning the title. Tatum and Brown have played like 100 playoff games. They've been to 6 conference finals. They've already been to the finals once before this year. They're in double digits now in terms of finals games played. It's not like they went from, they made a couple of moves and now all of a sudden they're contenders. They've been contenders for a while. These guys have a ton of playoff experience. This is not new to them. The only thing that's new to them is winning the title. And that is in contrast to a lot of different teams that we see finally break through for a title. Boston has been right here so many times already, and then they just added a few pieces and they finally made it. And all those pieces are going to continue to be there. And I know that there's someone watching this video right now thinking, okay, Tucker, but there's going to be injuries. Like, KP is not someone you can count on. Drew Holiday is someone that in the past has had injury issues. And then all of a sudden you're looking at a team that is basically Derek White, Jaylen Brown, and Jayson Tatum. And just those three guys together, we've already seen, are not good enough to win a title. You would be correct. That is absolutely a concern. Kristaps Porzingis is not a normal 28-year-old core piece. Like, when you're dealing with lower leg injury issues all the time and you're as big as he is and you've had durability issues the way that he has in the past, that's absolutely a concern. Drew Holiday, 34 years old, we've already discussed that. But what's special about this Celtics team is they've managed to change all these things over the years, and it just hasn't mattered. They lost Kyrie. They lost Gordon Hayward. They had Brad Stevens. He went to the GM position. Danny Ainge ended up leaving. They had Emi Udoka. They made the finals with him. He ends up leaving. They bring in Joe Mazzulla. It just hasn't mattered. As long as they have Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum at the core of their team, they're going to be at least semi-contenders as long as they have a decent roster around those guys. And they've shown an ability to continue to shuffle pieces in and out and still be, at worst, conference finals contenders, even going back to the Kyrie teams, going back even before that, then to the Marcus Smart teams, and then now to the Kristaps Porzingis and the Jrue Holiday teams. What's to say that if in a year, 2 years, KP, Holiday, these guys are not the same, but they still have White, Brown, and Tatum, what's to say that they aren't going to be able to just make their own version of the Jrue Holiday, the Kristaps Porzingis trade again in 2 seasons? And that's the main difference between them and all these other teams that we've seen recently win titles, is there's no core thing to point to within the organization as a whole as this long-term successful thing. The thing that has made them special is Brown and Tatum, the Jays as everybody calls them, right? But they've had multiple GMs, they've had multiple coaches, they've had multiple different versions of the roster, and for the last handful of seasons, they have been extremely competitive, and this year, they were absolutely dominant. And Brad Stevens has shown himself to be one of the better GMs in the league. Joe Mazzulla has shown himself to be one of the better coaches in the league, and the youth and the roster construction of this team is going to continue to be there. And yes, bringing in Porzingis and Holiday, those were special circumstances this past offseason. It has become abundantly clear now in hindsight that they should have had to pay more to get each of those guys, and they've both been unbelievable fits. And I don't think if Milwaukee knew that the Celtics were going to end up with Jrue Holiday, I don't think that they would have traded away Jrue Holiday in the Damian Lillard trade had they known that. I think that's abundantly clear. But we didn't know at the time that these were awesome moves. Specifically, the KP thing was a little bit of a question mark because of the injury stuff, because you were giving up Marcus Smart. And the front office just been able to continue to make it happen and continue to add great pieces around these 2 core guys. And the only thing that will stop the Celtics from being contenders for the entirety of the Brown and Tatum era is if one of those guys, for whatever reason, wants to go elsewhere, wants to go and be their own person, go and be the main guy on a different team. Maybe they get bored of being contenders all the time and they just want to go and create their own situation somewhere. Probably that guy would be Jaylen Brown, because it seems like the organization prioritizes Tatum more than they prioritize Brown. That's the only thing that will stop them from being contenders. I'm not saying that this is a dynasty. I'm not saying that they're going to win 5 titles in 7 years. I'm not saying any of that. But what I am saying is this is as sustainable of a championship contender from a contract, from a youth, from a front office, from a coaching, from a core standpoint that we have had in a very, very long time. I mean, even going back to the Warriors teams, we all knew that KD wasn't going to be there long term. We all knew that at some point that situation was going to have to resolve itself. And you probably have to go back to when the Warriors first kind of came onto the scene with Steph and Clay and Draymond, because even those Cavs teams with LeBron, we knew that LeBron wasn't going to be there forever. We knew that he was always going to be jumping to a new situation to try and win a title. There's no real scenario here that I can foresee apart from really bad injury luck or trying to split up Brown and Tatum for some reason in the next handful of years. There's no real situation I can foresee where these guys are not going to continue to be contenders. And with the perceived strength or lack of strength within the Eastern Conference at the moment, that is a terrifying proposition for the rest of the league. Now, the only other piece of this that could potentially throw a wrench in this, I'm sure someone has thought about this throughout the video, is the expense of the roster as a whole. This was a concern when they gave Jaylen Brown the giant extension that they did. Tatum's going to need a new deal. They've got Holiday and Porzingis signing new deals. Derek White is going to get a new contract. At some point, this is going to become arguably the most expensive roster in NBA history. And that might be the pivot point where if they have a weird season, if they lose in the first round for whatever reason over the next couple of seasons, there's some injury stuff, whatever the case may be, that might be the point at which they split up Brown and Tatum. They trade away Jaylen Brown. They try and save some money. That would be the only other wrench in the plan. Other than that, if you're a team within the NBA, specifically within the Eastern Conference, you're going to have to deal with these guys for a long, long time.